Well, we have an F-150 here from Chipola College where we do Tech Garage. Josh, you have an intermittent service light. What's it say?
Charging system service now.
All right, so that means we've got, what, an alternator problem, battery, or a wiring problem. But here at Tech Garage, we don't just take a guess at it. We're going to diagnose it properly. We're going to get this F-150 fixed and back on the road.
Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, Josh and Dave, they shared with me that the charging system has a problem. There's a light on the dash. And it always starts with a good visual inspection and verify the customer's concerns. So I started out with the visual inspection. I looked at the belt. It looks like it's in good shape. I tugged on it. The tensioner's nice and tight. Wires look like they're all plugged in. Everything looked fine. Kind of concerning. It's a 18 F-150 and it's low mileage. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to verify the customer's concern. And I'm going to warn you, it's a smart charging system. Well, what does that mean? I'm going to show you in a little while, but watch this, old school. You can see it's 12 volts here, and I got Benjamin inside the car. So Benjamin, go ahead and crank it up. And what you see, it went up to 13. So right off the bat, you might think, well, that's a good thing. Well, that's not the case with these smart charging systems. It defaults to about 13. That starter took 400 amps to start the car. This thing should be putting out about 14 or 15. So let me show you what I found. Watch the meter. I'm going to come down here and wiggle the wire harness. Oh, and when I wiggle the wire harness, you can see it. Oh, there it is, 14. I can wiggle it. I got an intermittent problem here in the connection. That's not going to be too much of an issue. We can actually get a connector and fix that. But the key is you got 13 volts. It rose up when we started the car. That's good, Benjamin. Normally that would start to drop down, and we'll show you that after the commercial on an old school charging system. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and get a plug like this here and just replace the whole plug. That's not a problem. Let me show you about this new charging system. This is pretty cool. So on this one, it's a smart charging system. Ford uses these for years, and you can see the alternator down on the bottom. The first line going up, well, that's hot to the alternator. That's your big line. It's the battery terminal from the back. The other one's going up right next to that. It's going up there. That's kind of a sense wire. An alternator only puts out what a battery needs, so that's going to sense it. And now the two, that's the big one. That's the Gen Com or Command, you can see there on the top. And then the other one is the Gen Mon or the monitoring. Well, how does that work? Well, that's bi-directional communication. One line's going to the alternator. That's the Gen Command. So the PCM, the computer's actually setting a point of where it wants it charged, and then the alternator is going to find that command, and it's actually going to do that command. Now, depending on the car and the inputs, everything, heater circuit, this circuit, air conditioning, rain, wipers are going, it's going to want the set point higher. And when we started the car, it should have been higher. Now the Mon line on the bottom, that's monitoring what's going on. So it's actually obedience. If it's actually following that, it's going to find it right there and know. Now, if we only had a scan tool so we could see the command in the monitor, and that would be awesome. Oh, voila, the man with the scan tool.
What do you know? Yeah, I was over there watching it while you were wiggling the connector, and I could actually see these voltages flatlining and dropping out every time you wiggled it, so it's pretty neat. And I want you guys to be able to see it. So if Benjamin, if you can crank the truck up.
So right now we just crunk it up and we got 13.83. That's not really good. It should be higher than that. So we're really in a failed state right now.
Right, so if you look over here to our generator command, you can actually see that it's flatlining right there at the top. And over there on the monitor side, it's flatlined as well. But if you wiggle that connector.
Let me see if I can get it to there. I'm going to hold it. Oh, I hear it. There.
Yeah.
It's working now. What does it look like?
All right, so it's going to drop down. If you look at the monitor side, it's actually sending it back. It's like flatlined again. It's still going in and out. There it goes. Yep, so on the command side, it dropped back down.
Wow, all right, I'm going to let it go.
It's peeking out.
That's good, Benjamin. So the deal is, on the actual command side, it's just going to be blips a little bit here and there. You're not going to be able to do this unless you have a fancy scan tool. And then on the monitor side, you'll get some feedback if you're a shop out there. So just be careful when you're watching this. Make sure that you do these checks and you make sure that it's actually not charging before you replace an alternator. Well, that's a pretty cool look at a smart charging system with a computer command control, but a lot of us still have some old cars. So stick around. Right after this break, we're going to look at an old school charging system and some tricks you can do right out in the driveway. We'll be right back with more Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com.
Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, is brought to you by RockAuto.com. All the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, I promised you an old school charging system, and bam, there it is. But before we get into that, let's talk about an alternator. What does it even do? Well, it supplies all the electrical power when the car is running. Well, it's supposed to, but today's cars with all the electrical loads, man, you got these amplifiers booming, you got kids sitting in the back seat playing video games, you got telephones, you got chargers, and if you're Dave and love the Browns, you got 3 or 4 coolers in the car plugged into cigarette lighters on game day. Let me show you what's going on. You got an alternator here that charges about 90 amps. You can see right here the ignition, the headlights, the blower, everything's going, and we're putting out 112 amps, man. That's a ton of amps. That's over exceeding the alternator. So what happens then? Well, we start robbing it from the battery. We start robbing it from the battery. Well, that shortens the battery life. Now to that old school charging system. Bam, look at that schematic. Man, that's a lot easier than that smart system over there on that Ford. This is just old school. You can see here I got 12 volts coming down to the alternator wiring the indicator. So that's 12 volts. And then it uses the alternator as a ground. So when I fire it up, this guy's going to send 12 volts back up here. Bam, it's going to cancel that light out so it goes out if it's charging. Then over here, we got a couple of wires we're going to feed 12 volts down to so we can excite the field in there and get it charging. So pretty simple. If you look over here, you actually put it on a demo on a board here, you guys can see. And I got the meter like we had on our pickup truck over there. So what if I fire this system up, you can see it's at 12 volts. To know it's charging, it should rise up to about 14 volts, and I'll fire it up. And you can see it, turn the ignition on. Bam, as soon as I turn the ignition on, there we are, 14 volts. Well, that's a good thing. That means that we're charging, and you can see when I shut it off, the light comes back on because I only have 12 volts going through one side. Turn it on, goes up the other, we know it's working. Now, 2 places you want to check voltage, pretty simple on an old school system. Check voltage at the back of the alternator. Now I'm going to go to the main wire here on the alternator that's going all the way back on our schematic over there that feeds the battery. That's the big one on the back of the alternator. Now you should have voltage there 24/7, so be careful. If your car is off and you think you can go out and disconnect it, if you touch that wrench to something, you're going to short it out, you're going to have a problem. So I'm going to go across that one, and there's 12 volts. That's a good thing. Now the other one, I want to excite that field up there, so I'm going to unplug this one right here. I'm going to come across that one, and then I'm going to go to the alternator ground, and I need 12 volts there. So I need 12 volts in 2 places. I need it at the top, and I need it down there at the bottom, so it can charge when we fire it up. Now you understand an old school system, they're working on the new school system, but you want to stick around because we got our Keep It or Crush It segment coming up right after this break. There's plenty more Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com.
Crush it!
I love it. Well, we got the big old engine out of the K10, the old clunker, and we are so excited about this project. Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, it's the Keep It or Crush It segment, and Dave, the K10, well, it's turning out to be a winner.
We decided the K in K10 stands for Keep It. This is a great vehicle, and we're going to be able to make our money back with no problem.
And you know, man, just like that, bam, couple touches of keypads, couple phone calls, and we are stocked to the hilt with parts, Dave. I mean, bam, they're here. First thing we had to do is get the old engine out, and fortunately, well, my son fell in love with the K10, so I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but we put him to work. So
I was going to say it's good here. You got to put him to work. You didn't have to do all the dirty work yourself.
Absolutely, and we actually sent him up to our old shop up the hill here, and he started the process, man. And you know, it was just kind of cut and dry pulling an engine out, but we got it for you. So first thing we did is we actually pulled the wheels off. He took the wheels off. Why do you want to take the wheels off? Well, it's a big 4-wheel drive, so we got it down to the ground. Work smarter, not harder, man. Nobody wants to be climbing up on a ladder to take it out.
Made it a lot easier that way for sure. Draining the fluids, that's crucial. We did that first. We started with the oil. That's because that stuff's going to get everywhere. You don't want to mess up the rest of your job, so do the oil first. Get rid of that.
Good move, and then we went to the coolant. We went to the actual coolant system, made a little bit of flood at that point, but hey, it's up in the air. You're going to rebuild an engine, you may get into it, or even replacing an engine. You're still going to have to swap the water pump and stuff. You don't want to flood your shop. Go ahead and catch it while you got up in the air. It's a lot easier at that point.
Here's a little time saver. We're going to remove the hood, and remember the hood is adjustable because you want to keep those body panels straight all the time. So before we took the bolts out, you scribe the position, took a marker there, and you draw the position of those bolts so you know it's going to go back in the same position when you put the hood back on.
Yeah, it's a great tip. And you know, to take the hood off, make sure you get you a buddy. We actually flipped it up, and You know, some people have debate about this, but the easiest place to put it is right on the roof of the car. I use a fender cover between the hood. Rock Auto has those as well. We went ahead and sandwiched it up there. It rides with the car, it stays with the car. Nobody in the shop's gonna kick it, nobody's gonna dent it, and you know where it is at all times. It's safe. I think I have a safety item there.
You got it. And when we're taking the engine out, you need some space to get that thing out, so naturally you're gonna have to remove the fan. That's what you guys did next.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he went and took all the wires off, a couple distributor wires. Hey, we're dealing with a 1984. It's not a ginormous wire harness. So, you know, unplugged the little coolant thermostat wires there, the grounds, the distributor wires, got the harness kind of out of the way, and then we're on to the next move.
Radiator's still on. We removed the brackets first, and then went on to the radiator.
Yep, super easy, 4 little bolts, bam. And then the shroud had to come out. It was kind of one piece, so we took the shroud out, and once we got the shroud out, bam, the radiator just lifted right out of there, nothing to it.
The exhaust flange was next. That's on the side of the engine, just held on by a few bolts. This is another time saver, and this will save some parts too. Went through the night before, sprayed it with some PB Blaster, let it soak overnight. That enables you to get all the bolts off. So that's a good plan for anywhere there's bolts on the engine.
Yeah, I can't say that enough, man. Spraying the bolts, that was genius, all right? So, hey, let's go on to the actual motor mount bolts. There's 2 motor mounts on there on the bottom of the engine. It was just a nut and bolt on both sides, still in the truck. We didn't have to lift it, everything was fine. Took the motor mount bolts out, and man, we're getting close to yanking that engine out.
This thing has a manual transmission, so only a few bolts to remove there. Did that, left the bell housing right on the engine, and we're gonna pull that thing out together.
Yeah, and that made it pretty easy because then we started to pull it out. Anytime you're pulling an engine out, slow. Just take it out a little bit, look around. Of course, there was a ground wire on the back of the head. Of course, there was a little wire harness to the linkage to the transmission. There's gonna be little things like that, but if you take your time and you just go a couple inches at a time, you know, it took us a good 15 or 20 minutes, but boy, it popped right out of there, and we got that boat anchor hanging right behind us.
It's a great policy when you're doing anything with an automobile. Take your time, because haste makes waste. You make a mistake, you pull something you shouldn't, and you're gonna end up with a much bigger problem than you had at the beginning there. Next step, John, the inner fenders were rusted, so those had to come off anyway, so that was the next step. We took those off, just a few bolts, and they were gone. And
Yep.
Rock Auto sells new ones, so we figured why not?
Yeah, that's the cool part about it. And you know, we just really had to see what we were working with. Dave, you always talked about that structural integrity of the vehicle, so we got it outside, fired up the pressure washer. I say we. He fired up the pressure washer, got under there, and man, he took care of that. It looked good. We're ready to do the frame and move on. I mean, man, it's to the parts now, and boy, do we have a boatload of parts.
Boatload of parts,
Look at
yeah.
that.
All from rockauto.com over there. A lot of name brands and stuff I didn't really think about when I thought about Rock Auto. I think of engine parts, but they have things like trim panels, the inner fenders that we're looking at, bumpers, all kinds of stuff. Carpet, John, from rockauto.com.
Amazing. I mean, yeah, Weston hooked us up with bumpers. They carry that. Auto custom carpets. I mean, Coverlay door panels. I mean, look at the shelves. We're talking about BBB, Valvoline, Moog, AC Delco. I mean, I can go on for hours. You go on there, it's amazing the brand name stuff that they have. And what really amazed me is this is going to be a total restoration. I did it pretty inexpensively, just by a few clicks of the button, and did it really, really quick, man. And more vendors jumped on board, Dave.
Yep, you got it. We had Willwood brakes. So we wanted some great stopping power. They provided us with brakes, and Holly hooked us up with some parts as well.
Yeah, Holly's got the seat foam and everything going on now, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. Painless wire harness, we're gonna put a new harness on the truck. BDS suspension, we're gonna lift it about 4 inches, get that body lift off, and do it right with their system, man. That's the beauty of it.
You got it. Speaking of beauty, we got this beauty right here. This is the heart of all of it, the small block Chevy that's gonna go into this truck. We'll tell you more about that when we come back, because there's a whole lot more. Tech Garage presented by rockauto.com right after this. Stay tuned. Tech Garage presented by rockauto.com is brought to you by rockauto.com. All the parts your car will ever need.
Well, welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by rockauto.com. Now we're surrounded by an extravaganza of parts, and our business educational partners, well, they stepped up to the plate, and the crown jewels right here in this engine. I brought in Kevin from GPT Go Powertrain. Kevin, we got that old engine there. Really don't want to rebuild it. Maybe I want to put a new engine in. What should we do?
Well, it's definitely in today's environment with the lack of new vehicles, it's more cost effective to replace your engine than replace your vehicle.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, it's 20, 30 hours to rebuild one, and you really can't even find a good powertrain today. What makes GPT so good?
Well, GPT is, we've been around a long time. We're one of the nation's largest powertrain suppliers. We like to consider ourselves a one-stop shop because we have just about everything for the vehicle. With that being said, our OE supplier of this particular engine, the reason we like to use them is because they do a lot of updates, re-engineering of the original design flaws to correct those defects. Lots of things have changed since this 80 truck has been on the road. You know, we're a long time ago. So pistons are changed to maybe a hyper-eutectic. Plasma moly piston rings are used, nitrided valves. The rear main seal used to be a two-piece on this guy, now it's one. Just things like that to hopefully make this engine last just a little bit longer, or hopefully a lot longer than the original engine.
Yeah, well, I was excited at the get-go, but I'm even more excited now. So we sure appreciate you guys bringing in the engine. And we also appreciate Rock Auto. Let's check in with them and see what's going on.
Look at this studio filled with fabulous items for our Chevrolet K10. The truck's from 1984, Tom, and rockauto.com has an amazing selection. We couldn't believe all the stuff we found for the K10. John and I thought we were going to have to go to find it, go on a treasure hunt to find the stuff we needed because the truck's so old. But that's not the case. How does Rock Auto do it?
Yeah, think about years ago. You spent a lifetime trying to find one window seal, and yeah, you go to our catalog. We joke someday you'll be able to build some of these popular vehicles, the K10, the Chevy Camaro from scratch. But we're not quite there yet.
You're close. We were able to find a whole bunch of stuff here.
Yeah, you know, all the little detail pieces, the shift linkage parts that. The truck looks beautiful, but the window sills are leaking, the shift linkage is loose, it's not quite right. We have those little detail parts.
We know the window seals are one of the things that always go first, and you guys have that. It's probably something folks buy a lot. And then you look at something as obscure as a rivet from a window regulator, and rockauto.com has that. And this is one that you kind of panic. You're missing the window crank, right. And you think you're going to have to go maybe to the junkyard and good luck finding one from 1984.
It'll be rusted out or broken. If yours is broken, theirs is broken also. So.
And the thing I love too, I mean, this is a Dorman part. This is probably an upgrade from the original OEM part. And RockAuto.com doesn't have just universal parts, maybe a window crank from the era. This is the window crank you need for your Chevrolet K10.
Right, and impossible to find stuff, grills and seat upholstery, and it doesn't just cover the seat. It's like it is the original fabric.
And we're not talking the seat cover. It's the original fabric here, genuine velour from 1984 there, and the vinyl on the side,
yeah, and the tools and
yeah, it even came with the hog rings and the tool to put those on when you're doing the upholstery as well. So RockAuto.com taking care of all your needs when it comes to just about everything you need for an automotive redo or an upgrade. They've got it. You can find them at rockauto.com. And you can find John Gardner right over there doing a little garage ed.
Well, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here in Garage Ed, and this week it's all about leak detection. Now, why do you want to check for leaks? Well, you should have joined us last week. We told you about the proper pressures in the system, and if you don't have those proper pressures in the system, well, you probably got a leak. So, Josh, we need to understand some methods for checking those leaks. Tell us about them.
Well, my favorite, and probably every technician's favorite, is actually using UV leak detection dye. So all you have to do is you put the dye into the system, charge up the system, let it run for a while, maybe send the customer, to dry for a couple of weeks, bring it back, then take a UV light and look around. And where you see the dye, that's where the leak is. But the problem with that is some manufacturers don't want you using dye. They're scared that maybe if it's coming out of the evaporator, it can get in the floor, stain the carpet, and then you have a mess. So a lot of times what you have to do is use an electronic leak detector. And what this does, it just sniffs around. And this is actually standardized to where if a leak is 0.05 ounces per year, it can detect it. So that's pretty crazy. You just go around the line, sniff around, beep, 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 beep. There's your leak.
Man, that's pretty good. Beep, 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 beep. That's exactly what it sounds like. And you guys, I'm old school, so you guys have to go ahead and vacuum the system down. Why would you want to vacuum the system down? Well, you're removing all that moisture. You're creating that vacuum Josh talked about in those early segments, and boil it off, and then boom, get the moisture out. If you don't, well, it could freeze up, cause problems, but even more, it's going to have some corrosion in the system. So I have a vacuum pump here I can kind of demonstrate it for you. So this is a vacuum pump, and here's a vacuum gauge. I got it hooked up to it. So we're just going to pretend this is hooked up to the system, and when this is hooked up to the system, I'm going to fire up the vacuum pump. Now when I fire it up, watch this gauge right here. I should create a vacuum. So that's what I'm going to do. Then I'm going to close this knob and isolate the pump. So I'll fire it up, and you see that drop down right there? Well, that's a good thing. It's creating a vacuum. So if I isolate the pump and I close this right here and shut the pump off, now we're checking for a leak. What do I mean by that? Well, it's sitting there. It's sitting there 5, 10, 20 minutes. It should never start to come back to normal. It should sit there in a vacuum. Now I can actually simulate. Watch this. I'm going to crack the hose here, and when I crack the hose, I'm going to try to wiggle it a little bit so it goes so fast. That's it. All right. So once I crack the hose, that's it. It went back there to 0. That's not a good thing. So you know you have a leak in the system. So you want to be able to hold vacuum. So with leak detection, man, you can keep your AC nice and cold and in tip-top shape. Well, we have one thing left to do, and that's finish up this show.
What an episode. We've learned how to diagnose AC problems thanks to John, and now we have a game plan for our Chevrolet pickup truck. John, how'd the connection fix go here on this truck?
Well, we had a game plan here too as well, Dave, and we verified the customer's concern. We went ahead and repaired it. Now repairing it, make sure you use proper wire connections, solder, shrink wrap, do the job right. Now we have to verify that repair. So in order to do that, Benjamin, crank it up. So we saw it drop down. There it goes. It's picking up. It's picking up. It's picking up. It's picking up. Come on, 14. What do you see over there?
Good news. It's talking.
Man,
we're
it's
good to go.
talking. That's all we need to know. Good job, Benjamin. Well, man, this was a good one, but we got more good ones coming up, Dave.
There's a great one coming up next. You do not want to miss next week's episode of Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com. It is one for the ages. So until then, from our entire crew, we'll see you next time here at Tech Garage. So long.
Might be a flashback.
Production assistance provided by Chipola College in Marianna, Florida. Chipola was founded in 1947, and it was recently ranked among the top 3 community colleges in the United States.